Like, comment, share, subscribe. Thanks for watching.
I was part of a group whose founder and leader just got sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. I'm sharing today my perspective, not on the trial itself, because you can go look online and see the details of the trial and everything that transpired, but to share with you today a higher perspective on all of this, And so, yeah, why didn't I use the word cult? So the group went by many names. Started off as the Ethereans, then went by Melanation, but the last name was Carbonation. And the reason I didn't use the word cult is because everybody has their own interpretation of what that word means, first of all. And I think that a lot of people have a negative interpretation of that word. So if I use that word, automatically you're going to make an assumption or formulate a perspective based off of that word. But for me, it doesn't hold negativity. It's just a way to differentiate one culture, way of being versus another one. And one is just less popular. Like the American culture is a cult, but it's just so.
Okay, while I can kind of understand where he's going with his comparison, I feel like Rambo is completely disregarding the fact that Eligio Bishop, aka Nature Boy, aka Chief Hoppa John Hot Pocket, aka Chief Administrative Segregation, is a destructive cult leader who caused a lot of harm mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually to many of his followers.
Is a cult, but it's just so dominant that we sympathize with it, that we normalize it. We don't question whether people want to be a part of it or not. So it's just interesting that we kind of have come to this understanding unanimously, and this is kind of what happens as cultures become big and huge. Their ways of thinking become normalized, and when people try to go against these ways of thinking and do something different, that becomes vilified. And I'm just starting to really understand the extent to which we've been programmed and the extent to which we're not allowed to think outside of the box. And this whole situation has just really showed me that, like, when you get out of line in the American culture, you will be bullied back into thinking how they think you should be thinking. And after I left Carbonation, I started to study different tribes, different cultures around the world. And what I noticed is that there's a lot of taboo things being done through these different cultures. There's some cultures who they'll steal wives out of the middle of the night, and that's perfectly normal. There's cultures who will circumcise their men at 15 with no medicine or no nothing, and that's a rite of passage, and that's perfectly okay. There's cultures in Papua New Guinea who the children will drink the reproductive fluids of the older men because they believe that it is giving them some sort of energy. So there's all kinds of really taboo things that are happening in the world. The difference is that they were born into that. And so if you're born into a culture or mindset in the US and you try to go outside of that and do something different, that is not okay, apparently. You can't break out of that box, right? You can't break out of box and do something different, even though we know and we study cultures who have very untraditional ways of thinking and being. And so this is what it just showed me, that when you try to break away and undomesticate your mind, that you're going to be corralled back into the farm that you were born into. And so there's a domesticated mind and then there's a wild mind. A wild mind is what I would say is people who are tribal, still living in tune with the earth, with nature, and whose way of thinking is inextricably, what's the word, intrinsically linked to the land and to the environment, and so their ways of thinking come as a result of that. So domesticated mind is people who have been born into civilization, who all they know is civilization, who if you try to use the restroom outside, that's taboo, because in civilization we have a certain way of being that dictates that you need to utilize these facilities that are going to flush your bodily fluids, whatever comes out of your body, to a processing plant so that they can process it and do whatever they do with it, right? There's this whole system, and I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm just trying to paint a picture of what we've tolerated and accepted as normal versus what other cultures all around the world have accepted as their way of being. And so when you compare and contrast these two things, you start to realize that here in America, like, we're only allowed to think a certain way. And anybody who goes out of the constraints of that is vilified and is going to be made an example of, you know, ultimately, because it's crazy. When this whole thing went down, the same things that happened in the trial that there was accusations of, I literally got on social media and see a post of a tribe in Papua New Guinea who buys women like property using pigs. In their culture, if you want a wife, you give 20 pigs for that wife and you get a wife, right?
Hey, Rambo, I have a bit of a news flash for you.
This is America. Don't catch you slipping now. Don't catch you slipping now. Look what I'm whipping now. This is America.
And comparing America to Papua New Guinea or whatever is just, I mean, what's your point? What's the point? Eligio Bishop, aka Nature Boy, was convicted and sentenced to life in prison plus 10 years without the possibility of parole because he R-worded someone, held her against her will, as well as released sexually explicit videos on Beyonce's internet of that individual. That is what he is incarcerated for.
If you want a wife, you give 20 pigs for that wife and you get a wife, right? That's perfectly normal in their culture. It's just how their way of life. Nobody's complaining about it or protesting about it. Like, that's just normalcy, right? And I'm not asking you to whether it's right or wrong. I'm just asking you to observe different ways of being on earth. In their culture, you cannot say no to the leader. If a leader has a certain thing that they see fit, you can't say no to the leader. And that was one of the things that was getting put on trial in this specific trial, which was crazy to me that I seen this post. The leader of the chief of the tribe, you can't say no to him. Think about that. So all these parallels started pop up, and they've been popping up since I've left, and I just realized that what Nature Boy was tapping into was the wild mind, the undomesticated mind. He was undoing all the spells of domestication and being a wild human being, and the world does not like what that truly looks like. The world does not like when you reclaim your sovereignty. Hey Grace, if you're watching, like, that's really distracting. I don't know what's going on with Zen. Yes, but the world does not like when you reclaim your sovereignty, because it's reclaiming back your power. So if you are a wild, undomesticated person, even if you just think like that, I'm not saying even to the extent of like growing food or, you know, having this self-sustaining village, even if you start to think in a way where I won't allow you to suppress my expression, there's going to be consequences to it. We can't let you do that here. This is not what we're doing here in the United States of America. This cult that we've established has these rules and this structure, and you have to follow along. So I just thought it was interesting that they brought a cult expert into the trial, because basically what they're saying and what he said in that trial was that he said they deprogram people from when they join these groups. But you got to ask yourself, you got to go deep in the surface. What do they reprogram you back into, right? Because everybody has a program. You can't exist as a human being without a program. So if they're deprogramming you from that mindset of the cult, What are they reprogramming you back into, right? So they're saying we have the way of thinking and being that is the superior, and if you get away from this and program yourself a different way, we want to help you get back to this way of thinking. And so I thought about that. I'm like, you guys are playing the same game. You just feel like yours is superior, and so you justify it through that means. Our cult of America is the best. So if you go out and think differently, we will facilitate bringing you back to thinking how we think. Right? Like, we will help you reprogram yourself back into the civilized mindset, because you don't want to be uncivilized. You don't want to be undomesticated. No, that's bad. That's a bad way of thinking. We have the answers, though. We know what's best for you. Just come back. We'll have some talks. We'll talk about why whatever you saw and experienced wasn't true or valid, or there was no knowledge or benefit to incur from it. We just need you to think the way we think. We'll get you a job again. We'll get you in the system. We'll get you paying taxes, and we'll just, we'll take care of you over here. Come back home. Right? So they saying the same exact shit that they're accusing him of incarnation of, just from a different standpoint. So when I started to really realize that, I'm like, you are not really exercising free will if you leave that situation and go back to the civilized world. You just traded one for the other. You're still not using your mind. You're still not thinking for yourself. Right? You just traded one for the other. And so it's just so interesting to me that people that leave, they revert back to the programming that they were born into. Not because it's better or superior or they get more benefit from it, but because they believe that, or they may be not aware that outside of the constraints of carbonation and Nature Boy and that experience that they had, you can still have a programming that isn't the domesticated mind. You just might not know how to navigate that, or you might correlate to whatever he taught and shared with you as negative, but that's universal knowledge. Whatever anyone teaches is already existed. It's universal knowledge out here that people make their own curriculum and package it in a certain way, brand it a certain way, and give it to you, but it's always been there. So just because you have negative emotions or a negative experience with someone doesn't mean that you should disregard all the knowledge and information that you learned, because it still holds true regardless of whose mouth uttered it. And so when you start to realize that, you could start to have a detached opinion about objective information, and you could not associate that or think that it belongs to someone. Therefore, you gotta, not partake in it because of the negative experience you had. So there's brainwashing double standards. America, civilization, will willingly brainwash you back into their way of thinking, but they won't tell you it's brainwashing. They'll say, we're deprogramming you. Whatever experience you had outside of the system, they were talking about being off-grid, being sovereign, not thinking the way that you were born into. Oh, man, that sounds terrible. Come, we'll take care of you. Come here, we'll deprogram you. Sit down. Yeah. Oh, yeah, pooping outside? Giving your bodily fluids back to the earth just like every other organism? That sounds terrible. It sounds like you really went through hell. Here's this bathroom. Just, this is how we do things here. We're just going to deprogram you from that terrible, terrible way of thinking. And ours just happens to be the right way. We just got all the answers and all the facts here. But you know what I realized? Like, they dissect the human nature, the wild human nature. There's people that can't understand it. So that's where science comes in and tries to make reason of the natural world, right? Like, oh man, we got these plants and these organisms, and they're made out of cells and bacteria, and they're trying to understand what they can't truly feel or experience. So because they can't understand or feel or experience the undomesticated mind, the wild mind, they try to use all these terms to try to break it down. Like, oh, you're a narcissist. You're experiencing a pathology. You're in an authoritative situation, because they're trying to find a way to understand it, because they've self-domesticated so much that they can't really even fathom that level of unencumbered expression. They can't fathom that. When somebody thinks a thought and lets it out and says, oh, that's my woman, that's how I really feel. I could lie to you and say, oh, she does her own thing. Like, that's you trying to like domesticate yourself. But what you really feel on in the inside might be something else. But because we have so many stigmas in civilization and society that program us to not express what we truly feel down inside, we vilify true human expression. So when we see that out into the world, shut that shit down. Throw that motherfucker in jail, lock him up, throw away the key, bury him, right? And I empathize with it. I have compassion because I'm able to see what it truly was.
Hey y'all, I'm just checking to make sure that my likes is liking. If you haven't done so already, please go on ahead and smash the heck out of that like button for me one time. Thank you.
Empathize with it. I have compassion because I'm able to see what it truly was, and if I have compassion for one side, I gotta have compassion to the other side. So if I gotta have compassion for the so-called victims, other side. So if I gotta have compassion for the so-called victims, I gotta have compassion for him. Because at what point do you give up compassion? At what point do you give up compassion? I can come up with a number of reasons why you should be compassionate for Nature Boy. He was an orphan. He didn't have his mom and dad. He struggled in the American system. He was incarcerated and institutionalized in the system. At what point do you stop having compassion for him, huh? You want to have compassion?
I ain't even finna hold y'all, but why is Rambo, a.k.a. Wild Kettle, sitting up here on Beyonce's internet acting like Eligio Bishop, a.k.a. Nature Boy, is the only person on the planet who has come from a rough beginning? Like, why is he doing that? There are so many people out there who have had their own childhood traumas and challenges throughout life, yet they don't happen to start a cult and abuse people and R-word someone and falsely imprison someone or share nude videos of that individual on Beyonce's internet. So I still am trying to figure out what Rambo's point of this is. Like, Rambo, just come straight out and say, look, I support Nature Boy. That's it. Just say it. Ain't nobody gonna be mad. We already kind of know.
Institutionalized in the system. At what point do you stop having compassion for him, huh? You want to have compassion for these other adults who made decisions that you might think that were bad or that they're victimizing themselves over. You have compassion for them, but at what point do you give up compassion for someone? At what age precisely? Tell me, is it at 25? Is it at 30? Is it at 35? Or are you just intimidated by the power that someone has and you want to shut them down by victimizing people who knew what they were getting themselves into, who refused to see the signs because they were on a spiritual...
I ain't even finna hold y'all, but is it just me or does it sound like he's blaming the victims here?
Who knew what they were getting themselves into, who refused to see the signs because they were on a spiritual journey. They were looking for something, and goddamn did they find it. They found it. But when they found it, they weren't able to make sense of it from a higher perspective. So they dropped back down to the lower perspective of civilization and had civilization make reason and bring justice to that situation. But in nature, that ain't nothing about nature. I mean, the justice system is amazing, and I was really learning a lot from this situation myself in terms of how the justice system works, but that ain't nature. That is not nature. And so if you use something like that to try to facilitate your own growth, your own development, your own justice, you won't truly ever be empowered because you're just having someone else do the dirty work for you. You're just having someone else come in and act as a force that you weren't able to tap into within yourself. You were not able to hold a standard, to hold a boundary. You weren't able to retain your voice and your power and say, no, I do not agree with this.
You know what, Rambo, a.k.a. Wild Kettle? You sitting up on here on Beyonce internet, carrying on and said you followed the trial. So if you did indeed follow the trial, then you also heard this same time I did.
I give up. I don't want to do this no more. And I'm, that one. So I'm going to, hey, chill out. You don't want to do that. You know what I'm saying? So I hugged him. And she's like, no. And she's like, no. And I'm like, and she's like, no. And I'm like, and she's like, no.
And I want to just make sure that you understand. She did indeed find her voice. She's had her voice. They all found their voice.
Your voice and your power and say, no, I do not agree with this. I know that you feel you are who you say you are. I know that you're leadership over here. I don't agree to this, and I have to stand up. And if you don't like that, I will leave. But I can't let you do that because you weren't able to tap into that power. You got the justice system to bury him. And I know you might feel good about that. You might feel like, hey, we locked up the bad guy, right? But guess what? There's more bad guys out in the world. The world is full of challenge. The world is...
Is it just me, or is Rambo, a.k.a. Wild Quetzal, sitting up here on Beyonce's internet projecting? Because he feels that's probably what he should have done when he left. Instead, he did this. Check out this clip.
You feel me? But that's it. I know, right? They said y'all was just so fucking happy all of a sudden. Y'all wanna say anything about all of a sudden?
Talk right now.
When you gonna talk? When you on your live later?
I don't want to talk right now.
You wanna talk later? What's wrong?
Nothing.
That's not honest. He said y'all was just so happy one minute and then y'all ready to go. I mean, I'm in support of whatever is most conducive for you. Don't make it a sad thing. If you saying that this is what you want to do, you want to go, then go. Don't be sad. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm happy. Spanish. This is what you want to do with your life. It's best that you go and go live your life.
Right.
You understand? We don't have to have a bad thing. A lot of people go, they try to talk shit about me behind my back.
Right.
You guys know me.
Right.
You know? And so, people want to know, one day you was happy and then all of a sudden you just leave. Why?
I'm still a joyous, happy person. It's not like that I wasn't happy. I just feel like I can be more conducive somewhere.
You could be somewhere else.
Right.
Yeah, like you always have happy moments, but like just overall, like I think it's like analyzing the purpose and like feeling like.
But did I do anything to y'all?
Oh, absolutely
No,
not.
No.
Well, the only thing you did was give us knowledge of self and like enlighten us.
Right.
Now notice, they all had to stand there and have a full-blown conversation with Eligio Bishop, a.k.a. Nature Boy, because they wanted to leave. That's right there was false imprisonment. Because if somebody say they ready to go, just open the door for them. Let them go. That's number one. Number two, as you guys can see, I kind of feel like Rambo wanted to say something more to Eligio Bishop, a.k.a. Nature Boy, but he couldn't find his voice. That's why I think he's sitting up here projecting.
More bad guys out in the world. The world is full of challenge. The world is full of negativity. The world is full of tyrants. The mission isn't to lock up the badness in the world. The mission is to come into your own power so that the challenges, the tyrants of the world no longer pose a threat. And so this is when I learned about the petty tyrant. And these aren't teachings that Nature Boy taught me. These are things that I researched and found on my own, that other people have come to similar conclusions on their spiritual journey when they sought a higher perspective. Because the surface level perspective is, oh, that guy was bad, those people are victims, lock them up, justice is served. That's the surface. That's the most surface. You don't have to try to look for that perspective. Why? Because most people live in that perspective. It's the easy, obvious perspective to hold, that he was evil or bad and he did bad things to good people or to innocent people. I get that. I completely understand that. I can conceptualize and intellectualize and understand that deeply and fully because I was there too. I felt that way when I left. But I had to search a deeper perspective, because I'm still spiritual. I didn't just go to carbonation and it was just something that happened and that has nothing to do with me. No, I went there for a reason. I resonated with something. I'm still that person. I'm still spiritual. I'm still love nature. I'm still all about those things. It doesn't end just because I left. And so I had to seek a higher perspective. And this is when I found these teachings of Carlos Castaneda talking about the petty tyrant. And I'm going to describe it to you because if you want to understand Nature Boy, you have to understand this is going to show you who he was, and it's going to describe him to a T. So it's called a petty tyrant. A petty tyrant is a person who causes distress by imposing his or her will on others using psychological pressure rather than physical force. The petty tyrant feels he may impose his will because he believes that he is a superior being and because he wants to operate from a position of authority. Petty tyrants are the button pushers, the individuals that have the ability to throw things off balance for you if you let them. Many petty tyrants are unaware that they are the cause of so much frustration. They are effective teachers because they force the warrior to closely monitor their own reactions and habitual behaviors. The result is mindfulness and the ability to shift the assemblage point even if ever so slightly in order to loosen the fixation to the conditioned response that causes the reaction in the first place. Castaneda believed that by looking at the petty tyrant through a different lens, a person could not only coexist with a petty tyrant, but also benefit from the relationship. This type of relationship would be most common in the workplace. He goes on to say, the challenges for the warrior, though, are to consciously get along with his coworker without being petty yourself. It's to rise above it. So he summarized that by saying, don't take anything personally.
So is he saying that, the survivors of Eligio Bishop, aka Nature Boy, should rise up above all of the emotional, physical, spiritual, sexual abuse that they experience? Like they're just supposed to just move on and not hold him accountable? I'm hoping that's not what he's saying. First of all, these individuals, I am certain, are already rising above this entire situation, but he had to be held accountable.
So he summarized that by saying, don't take anything personally. This is the biggest gift of the petty tyrant, to be able to recognize that even though you will be annoyed to no end by the petty tyrant, one must not allow themselves to be energetically attached to the petty tyrant. So this is a framework of dealing with this kind of energy, as you see, that didn't come from me. It didn't come from anything of that situation. It's something that people have already experienced along their spiritual journey. So Carlos Castaneda is teaching about Toltec wisdom. He has spiritual teachings as well. But I just wanted to share with you guys so that you can maybe consider that there's a deeper perspective here that we're not looking at, And so you have to ask yourself, anybody that was part of that, why did you go? What compelled you? What moved you out of the thousands and thousands of people who watched Carbonation and Nature Boy every single day? Why you? And so when you start to answer that question, you can kind of go down the rabbit hole of introspection. And so I asked myself, why did I go? What was I looking for? And obviously the surface level answer is like, well, this is just a guy and he was he was, what is it? He was recruiting people and he programmed you before you got there. That's the basic Babylon civilized mind trying to hyper intellectualize the spiritual journey. See, and that's the thing, that a lot of people have these terminologies and these words and sciences, and they could bring in experts, but they're all looking at it from a surface level. They're not willing to go deeper. And if you want to learn the deepest lessons, you have to search the highest perspectives. So that ain't the highest perspective. That's a baseline, easy level. I could understand it. But the deeper lesson is this. I resonated with something.
Hey y'all, I'm back with yet another amazing book that is available for pre-order. This book is titled The Tribe of Judah Experience. It is authored by Elizabeth, and she was indeed a member of this tribe/cult. She finally breaks her silence and speaks her truth. If you are interested in being one of the first people to have this book, go on ahead and contact Liz on IG And be sure to tell her that Medaya sent you.
I resonated with something that I saw. I saw myself in Nature Boy. I resonated with the teachings. Something inside of me was moved by what he was saying. And through his message, I was rattled into taking action. I couldn't focus on anything other than that which I resonated deeply with. It don't mean that I stopped resonating just because he's locked up or just because things didn't go the way I wish they would have gone. Keep it real with myself. I'm still that person. I'm still that guy. I still believe in nature. I still believe in what was taught. I still believe in a lot of things, and I'm not going to allow the things that I didn't agree with or the negative things that people took from that to take away from the purity of what attracted me in the first place and the reason why I'm still teaching, why I'm still sharing my perspective. And so don't forget that. Anybody that was there, don't forget what sparked you. Don't forget what got you to move, what got me, somebody who had never got on a plane, to get on a fucking plane and go to another country, to go on this deep journey, jumping into the abyss. Don't ever forget that, because the minute you forget that, you're going to be like all these people, just going right back into the system that you knew you didn't resonate with. And ask yourself, why are so many people interested in this? Why are so many people resonating with it? Why aren't people complacent and happy with civilization? There's something in the human spirit, in the human psyche, that knows that we are not living how we should be living, that knows that we are not fully fulfilled with the human experience. We are lacking community, we're lacking nature, we're lacking real food, we're lacking real purposeful and meaningful connections, and you can't ignore that as a society. You can't ignore that it's happening. People are going to search for it regardless of how they find it or where they find it. People are not fulfilled in this current civilization. And so,
Is it just me, or is Rambo, aka Wild Quetzal, projecting again? Because he's saying that everybody's not fulfilled. How does he know that everybody's not fulfilled in this current civilization? How does he know that everybody doesn't have community? Like, that sounds like a projection to me.
fulfilled in this current civilization. And so we have to acknowledge that, you know, it's not about just bringing people back and having them be okay with being complacent in the system and deprogramming people that try to leave, as they say, because you're just programming them back to the shit that made them feel like they needed to leave in the first place. You programming them back to the depression that they felt, the mental state of being that they felt by taking on the ideology that they were born into. So if you keep going back to that, you're going to keep getting the same results. You got to do something different. You got to think differently. And that's what this whole experience was about, was thinking differently, seeking a different perspective. There's so many spiritual teachings that have taught this. This isn't okay, if it helps you, understand that this has nothing to do with carbonation Nature Boy. This is a phenomenon. This is a phenomenon that happens in cycles during the human experience, that if you were a part of it, consider yourself blessed. Consider yourself lucky, because so many people don't get to experience that. So many people don't get to have the transformative experience that you were gifted in this lifetime. And so don't squander it, is all I'm saying. Don't squander it, you know. And don't forget why you left in the first place. Don't ever lose the spark. What gave you the voice, the desire to want to talk, to want to come on camera. I wouldn't be talking how I'm talking like this had it not been for that movement. Had it not been for what put that fire under me to want to get up and do something different, you know. And I can't deny that. As much as things went a different way, as much as things started to get dark, and there was a lot of pain, a lot of emotional distress, and there was a lot of hurt, I will never forget that. I will never forget that, because that's what it's all about, you know. Like we doing, it's a movement. We came to do something different. We came to spark the world. And they just want you to forget that.
Guys, this is a moment that I have personally anticipated. This book is now available for pre-order. Authored by Janae Newell. The title is Lesson Learned. Janae shares a part of her journey with us, and I am looking forward to this amazing read. I myself am already on the pre-order list. If you're interested in being one of the first people to get this book, definitely hit Janae up on IG. Her IG is janae.alexandria. So hit her DM, let her know you're interested, and be sure to let her know that Medaya sent you.
They want you to be distracted by the bullshit. But don't ever forget that. That's why we're here. That's why we online speaking our voice. Because we know what's up. We know what's real. Don't ever let that go. Don't ever let that go. So that's what I want to share with you guys today. I know it's a lot, but for those of you that have been there from the beginning, or no matter where you tapped in, if you felt called, like, that's where the power is at. That's where the strength is at. That's where the change is at. You know, don't ever forget that. All right, y'all. I'm gonna let some people in if you guys want to build on that. Uja.